stop that noise. It's just for attention, Mr. Davenport yelled at his two deaf sons, Leo and Max. The wealthy boss stormed out of the living room, ignoring the frantic hand gestures the little boys were making towards him. They had been doing this for weeks, pointing and signing in a desperate attempt to communicate, but everyone just saw spoiled children acting out. What they didn't know was that the new cleaning lady, Maria, a kind black woman, was watching from the hallway. And unlike the others, she saw more than a tantrum. She saw a signal she instantly recognized from her own family. But before we see how Maria makes them pay, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get into the full story. Daddy, please look at me. Emily's hands moved rapidly, her fingers forming words her father couldn't or wouldn't understand. Her twin brother Ethan stood beside her, his blue eyes wide with frustration. Jonathan Blackwell glanced at his watch and sighed. I don't have time for the dramatic gestures this morning. Just write it down if it's important. He turned away, not seeing the tears forming in his 10-year-old daughter's eyes. The large kitchen of their Greenwich, Connecticut mansion fell silent except for the sound of Jonathan's expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. He grabbed his briefcase and coffee without looking back at his children. Michael will be here in 5 minutes to take me to the office, Jonathan announced to no one in particular. Mrs. Peterson will take you to school. I have meetings until 8 tonight. Don't wait up. The twins watched their father leave, their small hands falling to their sides. They had been trying to tell him something important, but once again, he had refused to understand. Sarah Mitchell stood nervously in the grand entrance hall of the Blackwell mansion. At 38, she had applied for many jobs before, but never one in a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Her simple blue dress suddenly felt inadequate. Mrs. Peterson, a thin woman with gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face, looked Sarah up and down with narrowed eyes. Mr. Blackwell requires absolute professionalism, Mrs. Peterson said, checking something on her clipboard. The children need consistency. We've had 3 housekeepers quit in the past year. I understand, Sarah replied. I'm looking for long-term employment. May I ask about the children? Mrs. Peterson's expression softened slightly. The twins are 10 years old, Emily and Ethan. They were born deaf. Their mother passed away 2 years ago, cancer. Mr. Blackwell works very hard to provide for them. Do the children use sign language? Sarah asked. They do, but Mr. Blackwell hasn't had time to learn. He has people to help with that. Mrs. Peterson looked at her watch. He'll see you now, briefly. Remember, he values efficiency. Sarah followed Mrs. Peterson through the mansion, taking in the expensive furniture and artwork that seemed to have been chosen by designers rather than a family. They entered a home office where a tall man with prematurely gray hair was speaking rapidly into a phone. Jonathan Blackwell held up one finger, signaling them to wait. Tell them I need those numbers by 4 o'clock today, not tomorrow. The Medforce deal won't wait. He hung up and turned to Sarah without smiling. Mrs. Peterson thinks you're suitable, he said, extending his hand for a quick handshake. Start tomorrow, 7 in the morning. His phone rang again. He glanced at it and frowned. I need to take this. Mrs. Peterson will handle the details. Sarah had barely said 2 words, but apparently she had the job. The next morning, Sarah arrived early. Mrs. Peterson showed her around the house, listing her duties in a monotonous voice. The twins returned from school at 3:15. They have a snack at 3:30. Dinner is served at 6 o'clock precisely. Mr. Blackwell sometimes joins them. Your quarters are through here. The small bedroom assigned to Sarah was simple but comfortable. After unpacking her few belongings, Sarah placed a framed photograph on the nightstand, a picture of herself with her sister Rachel, both of them smiling and signing, I love you. Sarah ran her fingers over the photo. Growing up with a deaf sister had taught her that silence didn't mean absence of communication. She wondered what kind of silence filled this grand house. At 3:20 in the afternoon, Sarah heard the front door open. Two children with sandy brown hair and identical blue eyes, their father's eyes, walked in with their backpacks. A woman Sarah hadn't met yet dropped them off and left immediately. Sarah smiled and approached them. "Hello," she said, then remembered they couldn't hear her. The twins looked at her curiously. Mrs. Peterson appeared suddenly. "Children, this is Miss Mitchell, the new housekeeper. Show her your notepads if you need anything." She turned to Sarah. "They have their snack now. Apple slices and peanut butter. No exceptions." After Mrs. Peterson left, Sarah placed the snack on the kitchen table. The twins sat down and began to eat, watching Sarah with curious eyes. She wanted to sign to them but felt unsure if she should reveal this skill immediately. At 6 o'clock, Jonathan arrived home. The twins' faces lit up and they rushed to him, their hands moving quickly in signs. Jonathan stepped back, looking uncomfortable. "What did I say about writing things down?" he said, his voice tight. "I can't understand when you do that." Emily stomped her foot in frustration and ran to get a notepad. She wrote something and thrust it toward her father. Jonathan read it and frowned. "Victor is my business partner. Of course he comes to the house sometimes. Don't worry about adult matters." Dinner was a silent, uncomfortable affair. Jonathan checked his phone constantly while the twins ate without looking up. Sarah served the food efficiently, observing the family dynamics with growing concern. After dinner, a man in a tailored suit arrived. He had slick black hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "David Turner," he introduced himself to Sarah. "Mr. Blackwell's personal assistant. You're the new housekeeper?" "Yes, I'm Sarah Mitchell." David's eyes narrowed. "Interesting. Where did you work before this?" "Several private households in Philadelphia," Sarah answered carefully. "Philadelphia?" David repeated. "Any family there?" "Just my sister," Sarah said, wondering why he was asking. "Mr. Blackwell is very particular about who works with the family," David said. "Very particular." Later that evening, Mrs. Peterson handed Sarah a printed list of rules. "Memorize these. Mr. Blackwell expects everything to run like clockwork." The list was long and detailed, specifying everything from which laundry detergent to use to how the twins' school books should be arranged. "The children's schedule is particularly important," Mrs. Peterson emphasized. "They need routine." After Mrs. Peterson left, Sarah walked past the twins' playroom and paused. Through the partially open door, she could see Emily and Ethan signing rapidly to each other, their expressions fearful. Sarah hesitated, then stepped into the room. The twins looked up, startled. "Hello?" Sarah signed, her hands forming the words with practiced ease. "My name is Sarah." The twins' mouths dropped open in shock. They stared at her as if she had performed a miracle. "You understand us?" Ethan signed, his movements tentative, disbelieving. "Yes," Sarah signed back. "I grew up with a deaf sister." Emily began to cry, her small hands shaking as she signed. "No one understands us. We've been trying to tell Daddy something important." "What is it?" Sarah asked, kneeling down to their level. "Victor," Ethan signed, his young face serious. "Dad's partner. He comes here when Dad is away." "He goes into Dad's office," Emily continued. "He takes pictures of papers. He looks through everything." "We tried to tell the other housekeepers," Ethan signed, "but they didn't understand." "And Daddy won't look at our hands," Emily added, tears streaming down her face. Sarah reached out and gently wiped Emily's tears away. "I understand you," she signed. "I see you. I'll help you." The twins looked at each other, then back at Sarah. Hope replaced fear in their identical blue eyes. "Promise?" They signed in unison. "I promise," Sarah replied, unaware that from the doorway, Mrs. Peterson was watching her every movement, her expression unreadable. In the hallway, a small red light blinked on an air vent, a hidden camera recording everything, transmitting to someone who understood exactly what Sarah's skilled hands had just promised. Sarah woke early the next morning, her mind racing with thoughts of the twins and their revelation about Victor Chambers. The weight of their trust settled on her shoulders as she dressed for the day ahead. She needed to learn more while being careful not to raise suspicions. In the kitchen, Mrs. Peterson was already arranging papers on the counter, her posture stiff as Sarah entered. "Good morning," Sarah said cheerfully. "What can I help with today?" Mrs. Peterson handed her a printed schedule. "Mr. Blackwell has appointments until 5 o'clock this evening. Then Mr. Chambers will join him for a business dinner here at 7 o'clock. She paused, studying Sarah's face. "You'll assist with serving. Victor Chambers is coming here tonight?" Sarah kept her voice neutral despite her internal alarm. "Yes, they have important business to discuss regarding the Medforce merger." Mrs. Peterson tapped the schedule. "The twins have homework from 3:30 to 5 o'clock. Dinner at 6 o'clock for them in the small dining room." Sarah nodded, noting how the schedule would give her time with the twins after school. Perfect for building trust and learning more about Victor's suspicious activities. When the school bus dropped off Emily and Ethan that afternoon, Sarah was waiting with a smile. She signed "Hello" as they approached, earning shy smiles in return. "Would you like help with your homework?" She signed, leading them to the study room. Emily nodded eagerly while Ethan seemed more reserved, watching Sarah with cautious eyes. As they settled with their books, Sarah signed, "What subjects do you have today?" "Math and science." Ethan signed back, his movements precise and controlled. "I hate math," Emily added, with dramatic hand gestures that made Sarah smile. For 20 minutes they worked on multiplication problems. Sarah was patient, explaining concepts clearly in sign language. Gradually, Ethan's guarded expression softened. "Did you really grow up with a deaf sister?" He signed during a break. "Yes," Sarah replied. "Her name is Rachel. She taught me to sign when I was very young." "Our mom taught us," Emily signed, her face brightening at the memory. "She taught everyone in the house." Sarah nodded encouragingly. "Your mom sounds wonderful." "She was," Ethan signed, his small hands hesitating before continuing. "Dad used to sign too, before she died," Emily clarified, her expression darkening. "Now he pretends not to understand." Sarah felt her heart ache for these children. "Sometimes people act differently when they're sad," she signed carefully. While Emily worked on a problem, Sarah gently asked Ethan, "Can you tell me more about what you've seen Victor doing?" Ethan glanced at his sister before signing. "He comes when Dad travels, always goes to the office." His hands moved more rapidly, showing his agitation. "Once he made a phone call. He thought we couldn't understand, but we can read lips a little." "What did he say?" Sarah asked. "Something about taking everything, and he'll never know until it's too late." Emily jumped in, her signing emphatic. "We tried to tell Dad, but he won't look at our hands," Ethan added with frustration. Sarah nodded seriously. "I believe you both, but we need to be careful. Victor might be dangerous. Will you help us?" Emily signed, hope filling her blue eyes. "Yes," Sarah signed, "but we must be smart about it. Watch and remember everything, but don't let anyone know you're watching." The twins nodded solemnly. A team formed in secret. At 7 o'clock precisely, Victor Chambers arrived for dinner. Sarah observed him from the kitchen as Mrs. Peterson welcomed him. He was tall, with perfectly styled dark hair and an expensive suit. His smile seemed practiced, not reaching his eyes. "Jonathan, good to see you," Victor called as Jonathan descended the stairs. "Big week ahead with Medforce." Sarah moved quietly, arranging wine glasses on a silver tray. She kept her expression neutral while listening intently. In the dining room, she served the first course while the men discussed business. "The merger documents are nearly ready," Jonathan was saying. "Legal just needs to finalize the asset distribution sections." Victor nodded. then turned his attention to Sarah as she poured wine. "You're new, aren't you?" "I don't believe we've met." "Sarah Mitchell, sir. I started yesterday." Victor studied her face. "Mitchell, from Philadelphia, perhaps? Any background in finance before household work?" The question seemed odd. Sarah kept her response simple. "No, sir. I've worked in household management for several families." "How are you finding the twins?" Victor asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Challenging, I imagine, with their condition." "They're wonderful children," Sarah replied evenly. "Very bright." Jonathan cleared his throat. "Sarah, we need the portfolio files from my office, the blue folder on my desk." Sarah nodded and left, feeling Victor's gaze following her. As she entered Jonathan's office, his phone rang in the dining room. Through the partially open door, she heard him excuse himself to take the call. Moving quickly, Sarah collected the folder but paused when she heard footsteps approaching the office. She stepped behind the door just as Victor entered. Without noticing her presence, he immediately began examining papers on Jonathan's desk, opening drawers and taking photos with his phone. Sarah held her breath, watching as Victor pulled out what appeared to be financial documents. He photographed several pages, then carefully returned them exactly as they had been. When Jonathan's voice called from the hallway, Victor smoothly moved away from the desk, pretending to admire a painting on the wall. "Ah, there you are," Jonathan said as he entered. "Call took longer than expected." "Beautiful painting," Victor replied casually. "Reminds me of that gallery we visited in New York last month." Sarah slipped out during their conversation, her heart pounding. The twins had been right. Victor was definitely up to something suspicious involving Jonathan's business documents. Later that night, after both men had retired to Jonathan's study for drinks, Sarah decided to investigate further. She waited until Mrs. Peterson had gone to her quarters before quietly making her way to Jonathan's office. The room was dark except for moonlight streaming through the windows. Sarah carefully searched the desk, trying to identify what documents had interested Victor. She found folders labeled Medforce Merger containing complex financial statements. A sound in the hallway made her freeze. The door opened, revealing David Turner's silhouette. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Sarah straightened, thinking quickly. "Mr. Blackwell asked for fresh water in his study, and I thought I heard the phone ringing in here." David stepped closer, his expression skeptical. "At 11:30 at night." Interesting dedication to answering phones. "I'm still learning the routines of the house," Sarah replied calmly. David leaned against the door frame, blocking her exit. "You know, I run background checks on all household staff, very thorough ones." "I have nothing to hide, Mr. Turner." "Everyone has something to hide, Miss Mitchell." David's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Even people with deaf sisters and perfect signing abilities." The statement hung between them, a clear message. He knew she had been communicating with the twins. Before Sarah could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. "Everything all right here?" It was Michael, Jonathan's driver, standing in the hallway. His presence seemed to irritate David. "Just chatting with our new housekeeper," David replied, stepping aside. "Good night, Miss Mitchell." After David left, Michael turned to Sarah. "Be careful around him. He reports everything to Mr. Blackwell." Sarah studied Michael's face, wondering if he could be trusted. He was younger than she'd expected for a driver, perhaps early 30s, with kind eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. Michael hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I lost some hearing in my left ear." "Military service." He touched his ear briefly. "Not the same as being deaf, but I understand the twins better than most here. If you need help accessing certain areas of the house, let me know." Their eyes met in silent understanding before Michael continued down the hallway, leaving Sarah with a potential ally and a growing sense that the situation in the Blackwell house was even more complex than she had initially thought. In her room that night, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what you're looking for. Meet me tomorrow if you want to know who Victor Chambers really is." Sarah stared at the text message on her phone. Who would know what she was looking for? She considered ignoring it, but her curiosity won out. She typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came quickly. "Michael, the driver. We need to talk privately." Relief washed over her. After their brief conversation last night, she felt Michael might be trustworthy. She arranged to meet him during her afternoon break, then tried to sleep despite her racing mind. Early the next morning, Sarah was preparing breakfast when Jonathan entered the kitchen already dressed in a suit. "I need to inform you of a schedule change," he said without preamble. "I'm leaving for a 3-day business trip to Chicago this afternoon. The twins will be Mrs. Peterson's responsibility while I'm gone." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, watching him carefully. "Will Mr. Chambers be joining you?" Jonathan frowned slightly. "No. Victor has meetings here." He checked his watch. "I'll be leaving at 2 o'clock. Make sure the twins understand I'll call them tonight." Through the kitchen window, Sarah noticed a black car parked across the street. As Jonathan walked out the front door later, she recognized Victor sitting in the driver's seat, watching the house. With Jonathan gone, Sarah focused on building a stronger connection with the twins. After school, she brought art supplies to the sunroom. "I thought we could make something together," she signed as Emily and Ethan dropped their backpacks. "Art was Mom's favorite," Emily signed, her expression brightening. "She taught us to paint." Sarah spread paper across the table. "Tell me more about your mom," she signed while helping them arrange colors. "She was beautiful," Ethan signed, his movements gentle. "She knew sign language before we were born." "Really?" Sarah asked. Emily nodded enthusiastically. "Mom said she knew we might be deaf because it runs in her family. She made everyone learn to sign. Dad, the staff, everyone." "She taught you to sign from birth?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Emily continued. "She said it was our first language and we should be proud of it." As they painted together, Sarah shared stories about growing up with her sister Rachel. The twins listened intently, asking questions about how Sarah learned to sign and what it was like having a deaf sister. "Rachel taught me that different doesn't mean less," Sarah signed. "She sees the world in ways I never could." "That's what Mom said too," Ethan signed, his blue eyes brightening. "She said we notice things others miss." At 2 o'clock, Sarah slipped away to meet Michael in the garden house, a small stone building at the edge of the property. She found him waiting inside, looking nervous. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I wasn't sure if you would trust me." "I'm not sure I do yet," Sarah replied honestly. "What do you know about Victor Chambers?" Michael ran a hand through his hair. "I've been Jonathan's driver for 5 years. Started right after military service." He touched his ear briefly. "Lost partial hearing in Afghanistan. That's why I notice things about the twins, how people ignore them." "What about Victor?" Sarah pressed. "I've seen him taking documents from Jonathan's briefcase during trips. Once I caught him photographing papers when Jonathan stepped away." Michael's expression hardened. "I wanted to report it, but what? Jobs for veterans aren't easy to find. I have a family to support." He looked down. "And there's something else. Before Anna, Mrs. Blackwell, died, she made me promise to look out for the twins. Said they might need protection someday." Sarah studied his face, seeing genuine concern. "The twins told me Victor searches Jonathan's office when he's away. They've been trying to warn their father." Michael nodded grimly. "Victor is coming here today. He always does when Jonathan leaves town." "How do you know?" "I overheard him on the phone yesterday. We need to watch him, gather proof." They agreed to share any information they discovered, forming an uneasy alliance. Back in the house, Sarah found the twins in their bedroom. Emily was pulling a wooden box from beneath her bed. "What's that?" Sarah signed. "Mom's special box," Emily replied. "We want to show you." Inside were photographs, handwritten notes, and small mementos. The twins carefully removed a stack of photos, showing them to Sarah one by one. In several pictures, the entire family was signing together. including Jonathan. Your father knows sign language? Sarah asked, surprised. The twins exchanged looks. He used to, Ethan signed sadly. After Mom died, he stopped, like the language died with her. He pretends he doesn't understand us, Emily added, her small hands angry in their movements. But sometimes we catch him watching our signs. He understands. He just doesn't want to. Sarah examined a photo of Jonathan signing "I love you" to infant twins in Anna's arms. His face looked younger, happier, a different man entirely from the cold businessman she knew. Later that afternoon, the security system chimed. Sarah checked the monitor and saw Victor's car in the driveway. Mrs. Peterson hurried to answer the door. "Mr. Chambers," she greeted him. "We weren't expecting you." "I left some documents during dinner last night," Victor explained smoothly. "Jonathan needs them for Chicago." Sarah quickly texted Michael, "Victor here now. Claims he forgot documents." Victor walked toward Jonathan's office with Mrs. Peterson following closely. Minutes later, Michael texted back, "Creating distraction now." The house phone rang. Mrs. Peterson answered it in the hallway. "Car trouble at the gate?" She repeated, "I'll come check immediately." She turned to Victor. "Excuse me, Mr. Chambers. Security issue I must handle." The moment Mrs. Peterson left, Sarah moved silently to the office doorway. Victor was photographing documents from Jonathan's desk drawer. She recognized the Medforce logo on the papers. A small noise from behind startled her. The twins stood in the hallway watching. Sarah put her finger to her lips, then signed, "Stay back." They nodded in understanding. Victor suddenly moved toward the door. Thinking quickly, Emily knocked over a vase in the hallway. The crash drew Victor away from the office. By the time he reached the hallway, Sarah had slipped into an adjacent room. "Sorry," Emily wrote on her notepad, showing it to Victor. "Accident." Victor looked annoyed, but returned to the office, gathered his things, and left minutes later. After Victor's car disappeared down the driveway, Sarah hugged the twins. "You were very brave," she signed. "We're good at creating distractions," Ethan signed with a small smile. "No one expects deaf kids to make noise." Sarah returned to Jonathan's office to check what Victor had been photographing. In a corner near the ceiling, a small object caught her eye. A hidden camera. Someone was watching the office. Sarah carefully disabled it, but left it in place to avoid alerting whoever had installed it. That evening, Jonathan called for a video chat with the twins. Sarah set up the tablet in the living room. "How was your day?" Jonathan asked, his face tired on the screen. The twins began signing rapidly, but Jonathan frowned. "The connection is breaking up. I can't see clearly. Just write it down." Sarah noticed his tension wasn't from poor connection. The video was perfectly clear. "Mr. Blackwell," she said carefully, "Mr. Chambers stopped by today to collect some documents you needed." Jonathan's expression tightened. "What documents?" "Something about Medforce. He said you needed them in Chicago." "I see." Jonathan's voice was controlled, but Sarah noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped something off camera. "Thank you for telling me." After the brief, awkward call ended, Ethan looked at Sarah with knowing eyes. "Dad is angry," he signed. "Not at us?" "About Victor." Sarah nodded. "Let's make a list of every time Victor has visited when your father was away. Write down dates, times, and exactly what he did." The twins worked together, creating a detailed timeline going back months. A pattern emerged. Victor's visits always coincided with developments in the Medforce merger. "He comes most when Dad travels," Emily signed, pointing to clusters of dates. "And look, next time will probably be tomorrow. That's his pattern." Sarah studied their timeline, impressed by their observation skills. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "And he always brings a man who waits in the car. We call him the Shadow." Emily's hands moved hesitantly. "The Shadow has a gun. We saw it under his jacket once. That's when we really got scared." Sarah stared at the twins, their revelation about the armed man, the Shadow, sending a chill through her body. If Victor brought someone with a weapon, this situation was even more dangerous than she'd imagined. "We need to make sure you're both safe tomorrow," Sarah signed, her face serious. "And I need to see what Victor does when he comes." Early the next morning, Sarah checked Jonathan's calendar on the kitchen tablet. She noticed an entry for 10 o'clock. "Twins. Dental checkup." This could be perfect timing. When Mrs. Peterson entered the kitchen, Sarah smiled brightly. "I see the twins have a dentist appointment today. Should I take them, or will you?" Mrs. Peterson looked surprised at Sarah's helpfulness. "I always take them to medical appointments. It's on my schedule." "Perfect," Sarah replied. "While you're gone, I can deep clean Mr. Blackwell's office. It's on the weekly cleaning rotation for today." Mrs. Peterson hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. We'll leave at 9:30 and return around noon. Dr. Roberts is always running behind schedule." Sarah texted Michael after breakfast. "Victor likely coming today. Need you to watch for him while I check the office. Twins will be at dentist with Peterson." His reply came quickly. "I'll park where I can see the gate. We'll alert you." After Mrs. Peterson left with the twins, Sarah moved quickly to Jonathan's office. Using the cleaning cart as cover, she began a systematic search. The desk drawers contained typical business documents, nothing obviously suspicious. Sarah ran her hands along the underside of the desk, checking for hidden compartments. Finding nothing, she turned her attention to the walls. Behind an expensive painting of the New York skyline, Sarah discovered what she was looking for: a wall safe, expertly concealed. Without the combination, she couldn't open it, but she took photos with her phone. Her examination was interrupted by a text from Michael. "Victor just arrived. Black car. Man waiting inside vehicle." Sarah's heart raced. She quickly moved to the adjacent room, a small library connected to the office by a shared wall. She left the door slightly ajar, giving her a partial view of the office while remaining hidden. Victor entered moments later, looking confident as he closed the office door. He immediately went to Jonathan's desk and began making calls on his cell phone. "Everything's on schedule," Victor said to someone. "Jonathan is in Chicago until tomorrow night." He paused, listening. "Yes, I have access to everything we need. The final documents for MedForce are being prepared." Sarah recorded the conversation on her phone, trying to steady her shaking hand. "Listen," Victor continued, his voice lower now. "Once we have everything in place, it's simple. The trading records will show Jonathan used inside information. The SEC doesn't forgive that kind of thing." He laughed. "By the time anyone realizes what happened, I'll be running Blackwell Investments, and Jonathan will be facing serious charges." Sarah felt her blood run cold. Victor wasn't just stealing documents. He was planning to frame Jonathan for insider trading. "I have to step out for a minute," Victor said. "Let me check with Leo." As soon as Victor left the office, Sarah slipped inside. Papers were spread across the desk, financial statements showing stock trades related to MedForce Pharmaceuticals. She quickly photographed everything, her fingers trembling. Footsteps in the hallway sent her diving into the large closet just as the office door reopened. Through the slats in the closet door, she could see Victor returning with another man, presumably the Shadow, whose real name was apparently Leo. "The setup is perfect," Victor was saying. "These trading records show Jonathan bought MedForce shares right before the merger announcement. The timeline matches perfectly with his access to confidential information." "And you're sure it can't be traced back to you?" Leo asked. His voice was deep, his expression hard. "Impossible. I've created a perfect paper trail." Victor shuffled through more documents. "Once Jonathan is facing prison time, I'll be named interim CEO. The board trusts me." "What about the kids?" Leo asked. Sarah held her breath, pressing closer to the closet door. "The trust funds are substantial," Victor replied with a cold smile. "As Jonathan's business partner, I could make a case for guardianship while he's unavailable. Their money becomes accessible for necessary expenses related to their care." "Smart," Leo nodded approvingly. "How much longer do we wait?" 2 days. After the Medforce paperwork is signed but before the public announcement. That's when we deliver the evidence to the SEC. They left shortly after, taking nothing with them but leaving Sarah with the sickening knowledge of their full plan. This wasn't just corporate espionage. They intended to steal Jonathan's company and potentially gain control over the twins and their trust funds. Once she was sure they were gone, Sarah emerged from the closet, her legs weak. A tiny reflection from the bookshelf caught her eye. Examining it closely, she discovered another hidden camera, different from the one she'd found earlier. Looking around more carefully, she spotted 2 more surveillance devices, one near the air vent and another disguised as a power outlet. The house wasn't just being watched, it was under comprehensive surveillance. When Mrs. Peterson returned with the twins, Sarah noticed David Turner's car in the driveway. Through the window, she watched him speaking urgently with Mrs. Peterson while the twins waited in the car. What's he doing here? Sarah wondered aloud. That afternoon, Sarah kept the twins busy with a board game, watching them closely for any signs of distress from their dental appointment. They seemed fine, though Emily kept looking nervously toward the door. After dinner, when Mrs. Peterson was busy in the kitchen, Emily tugged on Sarah's sleeve and signaled for her to follow. In Emily's room, the little girl pulled a notebook from beneath her mattress. "We want to show you something," she signed, gesturing for her brother to join them. Ethan locked the door before Emily opened the notebook. Inside were pages of childish but meticulous notes, dates, times, and detailed observations about Victor's visits to the house. "We've been watching him for months," Ethan signed proudly. The notebook contained information about which rooms Victor visited, how long he stayed, what he touched, and who he called. The twins had even drawn diagrams of where he placed listening devices. "You made all these notes?" Sarah asked, amazed by their detailed observations. "Mom always said to write down important things," Emily signed, "so we did." "Victor started coming more after Mom died," Ethan added. "First just for business, but then he started looking through Dad's things when no one was watching." "You're very brave," Sarah signed, carefully examining their notes. The pattern was clear. Victor's activities had escalated over the past 6 months, coinciding with the Medforce merger negotiations. Later that night, Sarah received a call from Michael. "Sarah, be careful," he warned, his voice low. "Someone's been asking questions about you around town." A man was at the security company that services the mansion, asking about your background checks. "Did you see who it was?" Sarah asked, her stomach tightening. "No, but the timing can't be coincidence. Watch your back." After hanging up, Sarah noticed something odd about her room. The items on her dresser were slightly rearranged from how she'd left them. Opening her drawer, she found her clothes had been moved. The edges no longer aligned how she had folded them. Someone had searched her room while she was out. Sarah checked her phone, finding a new text message from an unknown number. Opening it, she gasped. The message contained a photo of her sister Rachel leaving her apartment building in Philadelphia. The text read, "Stop investigating, or your sister will have an unfortunate accident. This is your only warning." Sarah's hands shook as she stared at the photo. They knew about Rachel. They knew how to find her. The danger was no longer just theoretical. It had become intensely personal. As she tried to think what to do next, headlights swept across her window. The home security system chimed softly with an alert. "Front door unlocked." Sarah froze. Everyone in the house was already accounted for. Sarah moved quickly through the darkened house, her heart pounding. She had to check on the twins first. Reaching their bedroom door, she knocked softly before entering. Emily and Ethan were sitting up in their beds, their faces worried in the dim light. "Did you hear that noise?" Emily signed, her hands shaking slightly. "Yes," Sarah signed back. "Stay here and lock your door. Hide in your secret closet spot if anyone comes. I'll be right back." The twins nodded solemnly. Sarah waited until she heard the lock click before moving toward the stairs, grabbing a heavy vase from the hallway table as she went. She descended slowly, straining to hear any sounds. A shadow moved in the foyer. Sarah raised the vase, ready to defend herself, when the lights suddenly came on. Jonathan Blackwell stood by the light switch, his eyebrows rising in surprise at Sarah's defensive stance. "Miss Mitchell? What are you doing?" he asked. Sarah lowered the vase, relief and confusion washing over her. "Mr. Blackwell? You're supposed to be in Chicago until tomorrow." Jonathan removed his coat, his face tired. "I cut my trip short." The security app on my phone showed unusual activity around the house. He frowned. "Why were you coming downstairs with a vase?" "The security alert said the front door was unlocked. I was checking because everyone should be in bed already." Jonathan nodded. "I see. Well, as you can tell, it was just me returning early." An awkward silence fell between them. Sarah debated whether to tell Jonathan what she'd discovered. Before she could decide, his phone rang. "Victor," Jonathan said into the phone, his voice neutral. "Yes, I'm back in Connecticut." He paused. "An emergency meeting now? It's nearly midnight." Another pause. "Fine. I'll meet you at the office in 20 minutes. He hung up and sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mr. Blackwell," Sarah said, making a split-second decision. "There's something you should know." "Can it wait until morning? I have this urgent—" "It's about Victor," Sarah interrupted. "And the twins have been trying to tell you about him for months." Jonathan froze. "What about Victor?" "He's been coming to the house when you're away, searching your office, taking photos of documents." Sarah took a deep breath. "And I understand sign language. I've been able to communicate with the twins. They've been trying to warn you." Jonathan stared at her, genuine shock crossing his face. "You know sign language? The twins told you this?" "Yes. I grew up with a deaf sister. The twins have been keeping detailed records of Victor's visits. They've seen him going through your files, photographing documents related to Medforce." Jonathan's expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable. He opened his mouth to respond when headlights swept across the windows. A car had pulled into the driveway. "That's David Turner," Jonathan said, moving to the window. "He's bringing some urgent documents." Sarah noticed something odd in Jonathan's tone, a forced casualness that hadn't been there before. David entered moments later, carrying a portfolio. "Jonathan, we need to go over these before your meeting." His eyes narrowed when he saw Sarah. "Miss Mitchell, you're up late." "Sarah was just helping with some household matters," Jonathan said smoothly. "We'll talk more tomorrow," he added to Sarah, a clear dismissal. As David and Jonathan walked toward the study, Sarah caught a quick exchange of looks between them, something that seemed practiced, coded. After they left, Sarah went upstairs to check on the twins. "It's safe," she signed, opening their door. "Your father came home early." "Dad's home?" Ethan signed, eyes wide. "Yes. And I told him a little about what you've shared with me about Victor." The twins exchanged worried glances. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked. "We don't think Dad should know everything yet," Emily signed rapidly. "We've seen him arguing with Victor. They fight, and then pretend everything is fine. Dad acts differently around Victor," Ethan added, "like he's playing a part." Sarah considered this. "Your father just left for an emergency meeting with Victor at his office. David Turner brought documents." Emily's hands moved urgently. "Dad and David talk secretly sometimes. We've seen them." "Do you think they're working together with Victor?" Sarah asked. "No," Ethan signed firmly. "But Dad is hiding something too." Sarah made a decision. "I'm going to follow your father to his office. I need to see what's happening. Will you be okay with Mrs. Peterson for a while?" The twins nodded and Sarah texted Michael, "Need your help. Can you drive me to Jonathan's office right now? Emergency." 20 minutes later, Sarah and Michael sat in his car across from the Blackwell Investments building. Through the glass windows of the conference room, they could see Jonathan, David, and Victor engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion. "Look at their body language," Michael said. Jonathan and Victor are facing off. David looks like he's mediating. Sarah watched carefully. Victor gesticulated forcefully while Jonathan remained calm, almost too controlled. When Victor stepped out of the room briefly, the strangest thing happened. Jonathan and David's demeanors completely changed. They moved quickly, checking documents together with focused efficiency. "They're putting on an act for Victor," Sarah whispered. "But why?" When Victor returned, Jonathan and David immediately resumed their previous postures. "Let's follow Victor when he leaves," Sarah suggested. "I need to understand what he's planning." They didn't have to wait long. Victor exited the building 15 minutes later, got into his car, and drove to a hotel on the edge of town. There, he met a man in the parking lot, the same man Sarah had seen in Jonathan's office earlier that day. Leo Graves, the Shadow. Michael parked at a distance, and they watched the two men enter the hotel bar. "I'm going closer," Sarah said. "I need to hear what they're saying." "Too dangerous," Michael warned, but Sarah was already out of the car. She took a seat in the lobby, near enough to the bar entrance to overhear fragments of conversation. "Frame him completely within 48 hours, Victor was saying. "The SEC will have no choice but to act." "And what about his assistant?" Leo asked. "Turner seems too loyal. Turner is focused on his own career. He'll jump ship when Jonathan falls." Victor's voice dropped lower. "The evidence is ironclad. Jonathan will go to prison, and we'll have everything, the company, the connections, even guardianship of those brats if we want it." Sarah had heard enough. She hurried back to Michael's car, her face pale. "We need to warn Jonathan right now," she said. When they returned to the Blackwell mansion, Sarah found Jonathan in his office with the twins. The scene was strange and touching. Jonathan was awkwardly trying to communicate with them using a mixture of writing and halting gestures. Emily was clearly frustrated. She signed rapidly to Ethan, a complex sentence full of emotion. To everyone's shock, Jonathan's hands moved automatically in response, forming perfect signs before he caught himself and dropped his hands to his sides. The room went completely still. The twins stared at their father with wide, hurt eyes. "You understand us?" Emily signed, tears forming. "You've understood us all along?" Jonathan's face crumpled. For the first time since Sarah had met him, the cool, controlled businessman disappeared, revealing a grieving husband and father. "I'm so sorry," he signed, his hands remembering the movements with practiced ease. "I couldn't. After your mother, it hurt too much." "You know sign language," Sarah said aloud, stunned by the revelation. Jonathan nodded, not taking his eyes off his children. "Anna taught me when we first learned the twins might be deaf. We practiced every day." His voice broke. "After she died, signing reminded me too much of her. I couldn't bear it." Emily rushed forward, wrapping her small arms around her father's waist. Ethan followed more slowly, his expression a mixture of anger and relief. Jonathan held them tightly, years of emotional distance crumbling in an instant. "I never stopped loving you," he signed to them. "I thought staying away would protect you." Sarah watched, feeling like an intruder on this family moment. She moved toward the door, but Jonathan looked up. "Sarah, wait. We need to talk. All of us." His face became serious again. "I've been investigating Victor for months. I suspected he was falsifying records, trying to frame me for insider trading with the Medforce merger, but I've lacked one crucial piece of evidence, proof that he physically accessed and stole documents from my home office." "The twins have that proof," Sarah said. "They've been documenting everything." "And now you've seen him in action too," Jonathan added. "But we need to be careful. Victor is dangerous more than you realize. He's not just after my company. He wants everything, including potential guardianship of the twins if I'm sent to prison." "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan signed, his young face serious beyond his years. "To protect you," Jonathan replied, his signing fluid now that the barrier had broken. "If Victor knew how much I cared, how much you knew, you could become targets." Sarah thought about the threatening message she had received with the photo of her sister. She understood Jonathan's fear all too well. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We finish what I started," Jonathan said firmly. "We gather the final evidence we need and stop Victor before he can destroy everything." The power suddenly cut throughout the house, plunging them into darkness. Security alerts chimed on Jonathan's phone. Perimeter breach detected, multiple entry points. "Everyone stay calm," Jonathan said, his voice steady in the darkness. He pulled out his phone, using its light to guide their way. "Follow me, quickly." He led Sarah and the twins across his office to a bookcase against the far wall. With practiced movements, Jonathan pressed a hidden panel, causing the entire bookcase to slide sideways. Behind it was a steel door with a keypad. "A panic room?" Sarah asked in surprise. Jonathan nodded, entering a code. "After Anna died, I became paranoid about the twins' safety. This was one of many precautions." The heavy door swung open, revealing a small but well-equipped room with monitors, supplies, and 2 small beds. Jonathan ushered the twins inside. "Stay here," he signed to them. "You'll be safe. I'll come get you when it's over." "But Dad," Emily began to sign. "I promise I'll come back," Jonathan signed firmly. "I'm not leaving you again." The twins nodded reluctantly. Jonathan closed the door, ensuring it locked securely, then turned to Sarah. "The security system has a backup generator. It should restart in about 30 seconds. On cue, dim emergency lights flickered on. Jonathan guided Sarah to his desk. "I need to explain quickly," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I've suspected Victor of fraud for months. I didn't know who to trust, so I began my own investigation." "What kind of fraud?" Sarah asked. "Victor has been falsifying trading records to make it look like I used insider information on the Medforce merger." Jonathan's face was grim in the dim light. "If he succeeds, I'll go to prison while he takes control of my company." Sarah nodded. "I overheard him with Leo Graves. They mentioned the SEC and framing you. They also discussed gaining guardianship of the twins," Jonathan added. "Victor knows their trust funds are substantial. If I'm convicted, he could petition for guardianship as my business partner." "That's why you've been so distant," Sarah realized. "You were protecting them. I thought if Victor saw how little I seemed to care about them, they wouldn't become targets." Jonathan ran a hand through his hair. "I was trying to keep them safe, but I only hurt them more." The lights suddenly came back on as the generator fully engaged. Jonathan moved to the security panel. "False alarm," he said, studying the screen. The power outage triggered the perimeter sensors. No actual breach. He looked relieved, but still wary. "We should call in additional security." Jonathan made a quick phone call. "David, we need the team at the house now." Within 20 minutes, David Turner arrived with Michael. Sarah was surprised to see them together, looking like they'd been working as a team for years. "The perimeter is secure," David reported. "We've done a full sweep of the grounds." Jonathan turned to Sarah. "I should explain. David isn't just my assistant. He's an undercover investigator with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We've been building a case against Victor for months." Sarah looked at David with new understanding. "So all those questions about my background?" "Part of my cover," David said. "I needed to ensure you weren't working for Victor." "And Michael?" Sarah asked. Michael stepped forward. "I started reporting to David about 3 months ago. I noticed Victor's suspicious behavior during trips with Jonathan and contacted the SEC. We've formed a small team," Jonathan explained, "but we've been missing a crucial element, proof that Victor physically stole documents from my home. Without that, it's his word against mine." Sarah pulled out her phone. "I recorded him in your office today with Leo, and I have photos of him accessing your files." She handed her phone to David. "The twins also have a notebook filled with dates and details of his visits." David examined the evidence, his expression brightening. "This is exactly what we needed. The physical evidence of theft creates a chain we can follow back to the falsified trading records. We can stop him now, Sarah suggested. Jonathan shook his head. Not yet. We need to catch him in the final act, attempting to plant the falsified records. If we move too soon, he could claim he was gathering evidence against me. So, what's the plan? Sarah asked. We need to make Victor believe he still has the advantage, David explained. Give him the opportunity to make his final move. Jonathan opened his wall safe, the one Sarah had discovered earlier, and removed several folders. These are the real Medforce merger documents that prove my innocence. Victor still needs these final pieces to complete his frame-up. You're going to use them as bait, Sarah realized. Exactly. I'll pretend to leave town again, giving Victor the opportunity to make his move. You'll remain here with the twins while secretly documenting any incriminating actions. Isn't that dangerous? Sarah asked. What about the twins? They'll be safer at my sister's house in Boston, Jonathan said. Michael can take them there tomorrow morning. And Mrs. Peterson? Sarah asked. Can she be trusted? David and Jonathan exchanged looks. We've discovered Mrs. Peterson has been feeding information to Victor, David said carefully. She's been his inside source for months. Sarah gasped. Should we confront her? No, Jonathan said. We can use this connection. Feed Victor false information through her. They spent the next hour finalizing details of their plan. Jonathan would publicly announce an emergency business trip to San Francisco while actually relocating to a hotel 20 minutes away to monitor the situation. I need to get the twins out of the panic room, Jonathan said when they finished. They've been waiting long enough. When Jonathan opened the panic room door, the twins rushed into his arms. Is everything okay? Emily signed frantically. Yes, Jonathan signed back, his movements fluid and natural now that he'd dropped his pretense. The security alert was a false alarm. Ethan studied his father's face. You're not leaving us again? Jonathan knelt to their level. I need to explain something important, he signed, his expression serious. I made a terrible mistake after Mom died. I thought if I stayed distant, if I pretended not to care too much, you would be safer. Safer from what? Emily asked. Bad people who want to hurt our family, Jonathan signed. I was trying to protect you, but I did it all wrong. I should have trusted you with the truth. You stopped signing with us, Ethan signed, hurt still evident in his movements. It was like losing Mom and you. I know, Jonathan signed, tears forming in his eyes. Signing reminded me of Mom, of how much I missed her, of how I failed her by not saving her. It hurt too much. He took a deep breath. But that's no excuse. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry. The twins looked at each other, then back at their father. Mom always said people make mistakes, Emily signed slowly. Even dads. Jonathan laughed softly through his tears. Your mother was very wise. Are you going to start signing with us all the time now? Ethan asked, hope filling his young face. Yes, Jonathan promised. No more pretending. No more distance. Sarah watched this reunion from the doorway, feeling both moved and awkward, like she was intruding on a private moment. She turned to leave, but Emily noticed and signed quickly to her father. Jonathan looked up. Sarah, please stay. You're part of this now. He turned back to the twins. We need to tell you our plan. It might sound scary, but I promise we'll keep you safe. Over hot chocolate in the kitchen, Jonathan explained a simplified version of their plan to trap Victor. The twins listened intently. So we have to go stay with Aunt Lizzie? Emily signed with a pout. Just for a few days, Jonathan assured her. It's not safe here right now. Ethan's hands moved thoughtfully. Can we help catch the bad guys? You already have, Sarah signed. Your notebook of observations is crucial evidence. Jonathan looked proudly at his children. You noticed things adults missed. You kept careful records, You're the real heroes here." Later, as they prepared for bed, Sarah pulled Jonathan aside. "I received a threatening text earlier with a photo of my sister. They know about Rachel." Jonathan's face darkened. "Victor is escalating. We'll put protection on your sister immediately." He squeezed Sarah's shoulder gently. "I'm sorry you've been pulled into this." "I'm not," Sarah replied honestly. "The twins needed someone to listen to them. I'm glad I could be that person." The next morning, Jonathan publicly departed for his emergency business trip, his driver taking him to the airport where he wouldn't board his flight. Instead, David would pick him up and take him to a nearby hotel where they could monitor the situation remotely. Before leaving, Jonathan hugged his children tightly. "Michael will take you to Aunt Lizzie's after breakfast," he signed. "I love you both so much." As his car pulled away, Sarah and the twins watched from the window. The house felt suddenly quiet, tense with waiting. "What do we do now?" Emily signed to Sarah. "Now we wait," Sarah signed back. "But first, let's pack your overnight bags." As night fell, Sarah settled into a chair near the security monitors. The twins were safely away. Mrs. Peterson had been fed carefully crafted misinformation about Jonathan's trip, and all the security systems were activated. The trap was set. Sarah watched the dark driveway on the monitor, knowing it was only a matter of time before Victor made his move. Sarah stared at the security monitor, rubbing her tired eyes. The house felt too quiet without the twins. She checked the time on her phone, 11:15 at night. As she scrolled through the different camera feeds one more time, she froze. A dark car was parked across the street, partially hidden behind some trees. "That's not possible," she whispered to herself. She zoomed in on the image, her pulse quickening. It was definitely Victor's car, and she could make out two figures inside. Victor and Leo. They weren't supposed to come until tomorrow night. Sarah quickly texted Jonathan, "They're here already." Victor and Leo watching the house from across the street. Jonathan's reply came seconds later. "Stay calm. Stick to the plan, just accelerated. David and I are repositioning security. Act normal." Sarah took a deep breath. She needed to appear unaware of their presence while making sure everything was in place for their trap. She turned on lights in various rooms to suggest normal evening activities, then went to her bedroom to change into her night clothes. If they were watching, they needed to believe she was settling in for the night. Her phone vibrated again. Jonathan had sent detailed instructions. "Continue normal routine. Make yourself visible, then appear to go to bed. Security team in position but hidden. Remember, all cameras are recording." The next morning, Sarah made breakfast as usual. Mrs. Peterson entered the kitchen at precisely 7 o'clock, her face a mask of professionalism. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell," she said stiffly. "I trust you slept well?" "Yes, thank you," Sarah replied pleasantly. "It's so quiet without the twins." Mrs. Peterson nodded. "Mr. Blackwell called. His meetings in San Francisco will run through tomorrow evening." She checked her clipboard. "I'll be going into town for groceries this afternoon. Is there anything specific you need?" "No, nothing special," Sarah said, watching Mrs. Peterson carefully. She noticed the older woman checking her phone repeatedly, her fingers tapping nervously against her clipboard. After Mrs. Peterson left the kitchen, Sarah pretended to dust the living room while keeping an eye on her. Through the reflection in a mirror, she observed Mrs. Peterson making a phone call in the hallway, her voice too low to hear. Sarah moved closer, pretending to arrange flowers. "Yes, I'm certain," Mrs. Peterson was saying. "Blackwell won't return until tomorrow night. The children are with his sister." She paused, listening. "The housekeeper suspects nothing. She's cleaning today." When Mrs. Peterson hung up, Sarah quickly moved back to the living room. She texted Michael. Mrs. P just confirmed the schedule to someone. Likely Victor. Later, when Mrs. Peterson announced she was leaving for groceries, Sarah nodded pleasantly, keeping her face neutral despite knowing this was likely part of Victor's plan, getting Mrs. Peterson out of the house temporarily. Once alone, Sarah contacted Jonathan. Mrs. Peterson left for groceries. I think they're planning to make their move soon." "Good," Jonathan replied. "We've repositioned our people." David is on his way disguised as a delivery person. He'll drop off final equipment. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. A delivery man in a brown uniform stood there with a package. "Delivery for Blackwell," David said, his voice different, his appearance transformed by a cap and fake beard. He handed her the package, whispering, "Additional cameras and tracking devices." Instructions inside. Sarah thanked him loudly for the benefit of anyone watching, then closed the door. Inside the package were tiny, sophisticated cameras and tracking devices, along with a note with Jonathan's handwriting. "Place these in the documents in the safe. All surveillance systems operational. We'll track everything Victor touches." Sarah worked quickly, going to Jonathan's office and opening the safe using the combination he had provided. She carefully placed the tiny trackers inside specific documents related to the Medforce merger, then rearranged everything exactly as Jonathan had instructed. As she finished, her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Victor's car moving closer to property. Expect entry within the hour." Sarah's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had practiced this moment in her mind many times. She moved to the kitchen, pretending to prepare dinner while actually positioning herself to watch the security feed on a tablet hidden behind a cookbook. The minutes ticked by slowly. At exactly 5:30, the doorbell rang. It was David again, this time in a different disguise. "Final flower delivery for Mrs. Blackwell," he announced loudly, handing Sarah an elaborate bouquet. Inside the flowers was a small earpiece. "All systems are go," David whispered. "Jonathan is watching remotely. Put this in your ear when you're alone." After David left, Sarah put the earpiece in. Jonathan's voice came through clearly. "Sarah, can you hear me? Victor is approaching the service entrance. Mrs. Peterson gave him the security code. Leo is staying in the car for now." "I hear you," Sarah whispered. "I'm ready." "Remember, let him think no one knows he's there. We need clear evidence of him stealing the documents." Sarah positioned herself in the kitchen, pretending to chop vegetables for dinner. Through the security feed on her tablet, she watched as Victor approached the service entrance at the back of the house. He entered a code, and the door unlocked. "He's inside," Jonathan's voice confirmed in her ear. Sarah heard footsteps in the hallway, then Mrs. Peterson's voice greeting Victor. "Mr. Chambers, everything is prepared as you requested. Miss Mitchell is out grocery shopping. You have about 45 minutes." "Perfect," Victor replied. "Stay by the front door and text me if she returns early." Sarah moved silently to her predetermined observation point, a small alcove near Jonathan's office with a partial view inside. She activated the recording app on her phone as Victor entered the office and immediately went to the bookshelf. He moved with confident familiarity, pulling books aside to reveal the wall safe. Using a piece of paper with numbers written on it, Victor entered the combination. The safe opened smoothly. "He's using the combination Mrs. Peterson gave him," Jonathan whispered in her ear. "Every movement is being recorded from multiple angles." Victor pulled out folders labeled Medforce Merger, Confidential, and spread the documents across the desk. He took photographs of each page with his phone, smiling to himself. "This is perfect," he muttered. "With these final documents, the SEC will have everything they need to charge Jonathan with insider trading." Sarah held her breath as Victor collected more documents from the safe. Each one contained the tiny trackers she had planted earlier. "Got him!" Jonathan whispered triumphantly in her ear. "He's taking the bait." "Now we just need—" Jonathan's voice suddenly cut off. The earpiece went dead. At the same moment, Sarah's tablet screen showing the security feed went black. Sarah felt a surge of panic. What had happened to the system? She tried to text Jonathan, but her phone showed no signal. Something or someone had jammed all communications. From her hiding place, Sarah heard a sound that made her blood run cold, the distinctive click of the service entrance door opening again. Heavy footsteps moved through the hallway, different from Victor's lighter stride. Leo Graves had entered the house, and he wasn't on any of the surveillance feeds. The carefully planned trap was suddenly compromised. Sarah weighed her options quickly. She needed to warn Mrs. Peterson, regardless of her betrayal. No one deserved to face Leo Graves unprepared. Moving silently through the back corridors of the mansion, Sarah headed toward the kitchen where Mrs. Peterson should be waiting. The kitchen was empty, but Sarah noticed a chair overturned and Mrs. Peterson's phone on the floor. Signs of a struggle. Sarah heard Leo's footsteps, methodically moving through the house, checking rooms one by one. He was searching for something, or someone. With the security system down and communications jammed, she was on her own. Moving as quietly as possible, Sarah made her way toward the pantry, looking for a place to hide or a weapon to defend herself. Through the crack in the pantry door, she saw Leo discover Mrs. Peterson unconscious on the floor of the butler's pantry. Instead of helping the older woman, Leo pulled out his phone and called Victor. "The housekeeper is taken care of," he said coldly. "No sign of the other one yet." Sarah realized with horror that they planned to eliminate all witnesses. This wasn't just about stealing documents anymore. It was about removing anyone who could testify against them. As Leo continued his search, Sarah grabbed a metal ladle and banged it against a pot, then quickly moved to a different location. The noise drew Leo away from her actual position, buying her precious time. She needed to reach Mrs. Peterson and find a way to restore communications with Jonathan. But first, she had to avoid being caught by Leo, who was now systematically searching every room in the house. In the dining room, Sarah caught a glimpse of Victor in Jonathan's office. He had finished photographing documents and was now downloading files from Jonathan's computer, his face triumphant. Sarah circled back to the butler's pantry where Mrs. Peterson lay. The older woman was beginning to regain consciousness, her eyelids fluttering. "Mrs. Peterson," Sarah whispered, helping her sit up. "Can you move? We need to hide." Mrs. Peterson's eyes focused slowly. "Sarah? He hit me." She touched a bruise forming on her temple. "I activated the silent alarm before he knocked me out." "The security system is down," Sarah told her, "and all communications are jammed." "The secondary system," Mrs. Peterson whispered. "It runs on a separate circuit. Jonathan installed it after Anna died. It sends an alert directly to police." Hope flared in Sarah's chest. If the secondary system was still working, help might already be on the way. Sarah helped Mrs. Peterson to her feet, and they moved silently toward a narrow service passageway as Leo's footsteps approached again. They pressed themselves against the wall, barely breathing as he passed by. Outside, Jonathan and David would have realized something was wrong when all communications suddenly failed. But without eyes inside the house, they couldn't know exactly what was happening. Sarah made a decision. They needed to reach the panic room, the most secure place in the house. But to get there, they would have to cross the main hallway and reach Jonathan's office without being seen by either Victor or Leo. Using the sign language skills that had brought her into this situation in the first place, Sarah began silently communicating with Mrs. Peterson, showing her basic hand signals for wait, move, and stop. Even in the darkness, these simple signs could guide them. Mrs. Peterson caught on quickly, following Sarah's lead as they made their way through the back corridors of the mansion toward Jonathan's office. They were just approaching the office when a floorboard creaked beneath Mrs. Peterson's foot. Leo's head snapped in their direction. "There!" he shouted. "Victor, they're here! Run!" Sarah grabbed Mrs. Peterson's arm, pulling her toward Jonathan's office as Leo charged toward them. They needed to reach the panic room controls. Victor emerged from the office, blocking their path. "Well, well. Not out grocery shopping after all, Miss Mitchell?" Sarah pushed Mrs. Peterson behind her, backing away slowly. Leo approached from the other side, trapping them in the hallway. "I'm disappointed, Mrs. Peterson," Victor said, his voice cold. "You were supposed to ensure the house was empty." Mrs. Peterson straightened her shoulders. "I served this family for 15 years. Anna would be ashamed of what you're doing." Victor laughed. "Anna's dead, and soon Jonathan will be ruined." He turned to Leo. "Check them for phones." Leo roughly patted down Mrs. Peterson, finding nothing. When he reached for Sarah, she stepped back. "Looking for this?" Sarah held up her phone. "I've been recording everything. The police are already on their way." "Give me that!" Leo growled, lunging for her. Mrs. Peterson suddenly clutched her chest, gasping dramatically and collapsing to the floor. "My heart!" she cried out. The distraction worked. As Leo and Victor both glanced at Mrs. Peterson, Sarah darted past them into Jonathan's office, slamming the door behind her. She rushed toward the bookcase that concealed the panic room. Outside, she heard Leo curse. "She's bluffing! Get up!" Followed by Mrs. Peterson's continued cries of pain, Sarah reached the bookcase, frantically searching for the hidden panel Jonathan had pressed earlier. Her fingers found a small indentation, and she pushed hard. The bookcase slid sideways with a soft hiss. The office door burst open as Victor and Leo stormed in. Sarah stood before the exposed panic room door, her hand hovering over the keypad. "Step away from there," Victor ordered. He held Mrs. Peterson by the arm. Her heart attack performance had ended. In the distance, faint sirens became audible. Victor's face hardened as he heard the sound. "Police won't help you. By the time they get here, we'll be gone, along with evidence that will destroy Jonathan Blackwell." He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. "Everything I need is right here." "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked, trying to keep him talking while her hand inched toward the panic room controls. "Because Jonathan doesn't deserve what he has," Victor spat. "We built that company together, but he got all the credit, all the recognition. When Medforce approached us for the merger, they wanted him, not me." Leo grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her away from the panic room. "We don't have time for this. The police are coming." "Wait," Victor said, his eyes calculating. "We need insurance." He turned to Sarah. "You're coming with us. A hostage will ensure our safe passage." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Sarah said firmly. "You don't have a choice," Leo said, tightening his grip on her arm. Outside, the sirens grew louder. Victor moved toward the window, peering through the curtains. "They're still at the gate," he reported. "We have 2 minutes, maybe 3. He turned back to Sarah. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out with us, nice and calm. If you try anything, Leo will make sure Mrs. Peterson doesn't live to see tomorrow." Sarah glanced at Mrs. Peterson, whose eyes were wide with fear. She needed to stall longer. "How did you falsify the trading records?" she asked. "The SEC will figure it out eventually." Victor smiled, unable to resist boasting about his scheme. "It was brilliant, actually. I created a perfect paper trail showing Jonathan bought Medforce shares right before the merger announcement. The timeline matches perfectly with his access to confidential information." "But the records are fake," Sarah pressed. "Of course they're fake," Victor said dismissively. "I've been planning this for months. Jonathan will go to prison for insider trading, I'll take over the company, and then I'll petition for guardianship of those deaf brats and their trust funds." Leo shifted impatiently. "Enough talking. We need to go now." "The twins," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "You were going to use children for their money?" "They're just means to an end," Victor shrugged. "Their trust funds will finance my new ventures after I gut Blackwell Investments." Sarah felt a surge of anger. "You won't get away with this," Victor laughed. "I already have. There's no proof of what I've done. It's my word against yours, and I have documents showing Jonathan is the criminal, not me." As he spoke, Sarah noticed a tiny red light blinking on the panic room control panel. The recording system was active, capturing every word. Jonathan had mentioned it was part of the security features, but she hadn't realized it could be activated separately from the room itself. Leo's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. "Police cars just entered the property. We need to move now." Victor grabbed Sarah's arm. "You're coming with us. Mrs. Peterson stays here as a distraction." As they started toward the door, Sarah deliberately stumbled, falling against the panic room control panel. Her fingers quickly pressed a sequence of buttons, not the entry code, but an emergency signal Jonathan had mentioned. Leo yanked her back to her feet. "Stop stalling." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Sarah repeated, pulling away from his grip. Leo raised his hand to strike her when the office door burst open. Jonathan stood there with David and 2 police officers behind him. "It's over, Victor," Jonathan said firmly. Victor's face contorted with rage. "You're supposed to be in San Francisco." "I never left Connecticut," Jonathan replied. "We've been monitoring everything." "You have nothing on me," Victor insisted, backing away. "No proof." Jonathan smiled coldly. "Actually, we have everything, including your full confession about falsifying trading records and planning to steal the twins' trust funds. The panic room records automatically. You've been broadcasting your entire plan for the past 5 minutes." Victor lunged for the flash drive he'd left on the desk, but one of the officers intercepted him. The other officer restrained Leo, who didn't resist once he realized they were surrounded. "Victor Chambers, Leo Graves, you're under arrest," the first officer announced, reciting their rights as he handcuffed Victor. As the police led them away, Sarah sank into a chair, the tension draining from her body. Mrs. Peterson sat beside her, looking both relieved and ashamed. "I'm so sorry," Mrs. Peterson whispered. "Victor was blackmailing me. My son has gambling debts, and Victor threatened to hurt him if I didn't help." Jonathan approached them. "Are you both all right?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, but how did you know what was happening? The communications were jammed. When we lost contact, we knew something was wrong," David explained. "Mrs. Peterson's silent alarm triggered a secondary system that sent alerts to both the police and our team. We were already on our way when the security cameras went down," Jonathan added. "The panic room emergency signal you activated gave us your exact location in the house." More police officers entered, beginning to collect evidence. One approached Jonathan. "Mr. Blackwell, we found these devices outside," he said, holding up small electronic jammers. "They were blocking all communications in and around the house." David took the devices, examining them carefully. Professional grade. Victor came prepared. A detective in a gray suit walked in, surveying the scene. "Mr. Blackwell?" "I'm Detective Malone. We'll need statements from everyone." Over the next hour, Sarah, Jonathan, and Mrs. Peterson gave their accounts of what had happened. Officers collected the recordings from the panic room system and gathered the documents Victor had been photographing. As police finished their work, Detective Malone pulled Jonathan aside. Sarah couldn't hear their conversation, but Jonathan's expression grew increasingly concerned. When the police finally left, taking Victor and Leo into custody, the house felt eerily quiet. David coordinated with remaining officers outside while Jonathan returned to Sarah and Mrs. Peterson in the living room. "The police have everything they need to charge Victor and Leo," Jonathan said. "The evidence is overwhelming. Breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, corporate espionage, and fraud." "What about Mrs. Peterson?" Sarah asked. "Will she face charges for helping Victor?" Jonathan shook his head. "No. Her cooperation at the end and the evidence of blackmail should protect her." He turned to Mrs. Peterson. "But I think it's best if you take some time off with pay until this is all resolved." Mrs. Peterson nodded tearfully. "I understand. Thank you for your kindness." After Mrs. Peterson went to her quarters to rest, Sarah finally asked the question that had been bothering her since the detective's conversation with Jonathan. "What did Detective Malone say to you?" "You looked worried." Jonathan sighed heavily. "He found evidence that this conspiracy extends beyond Victor. Some of the financial manipulation appears to have started before Victor even joined my company." "Someone else is involved?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "It seems that way," Jonathan confirmed. "Detective Malone believes there's someone still inside Blackwell Investments who helped Victor, Someone who's been working against me for years. Sarah frowned. But who would... She was interrupted by Michael calling from the doorway. Jonathan! The twins are on the phone. They're worried after seeing police cars on the news heading toward your address. Jonathan managed to smile despite his worry. I should talk to them. They'll be relieved to know we're all safe. He squeezed Sarah's hand gratefully. Thank you for everything you did today. As Jonathan went to speak with his children, Sarah stood by the window, watching police cars still parked in the driveway. They had caught Victor, but the danger wasn't over. Someone else was out there, someone who had helped create this elaborate scheme to destroy Jonathan's life. And that person was still free. For the next 3 days, the Blackwell mansion remained cordoned off with yellow police tape. Teams of investigators combed through the house, collecting evidence, dusting for fingerprints, and downloading data from the security systems. Jonathan, Sarah, and the twins temporarily relocated to his penthouse in downtown Greenwich. The spacious apartment overlooked the harbor, but even its luxurious surroundings couldn't ease the tension Jonathan felt about Detective Malone's revelation. On their first morning there, Sarah found Jonathan at the kitchen counter, reviewing financial documents while the twins ate breakfast. She noticed how he now signed good morning to them naturally when they entered a room, and how their faces lit up each time he did. Any news from the investigation? Sarah asked, pouring herself coffee. Jonathan frowned. Detective Malone called earlier. The financial records they seized from Victor show discrepancies dating back 5 years, before Victor even became my partner. So someone else has been helping him. It seems that way. Someone who's been with the company from the beginning. Emily tapped the table to get their attention, then signed, Are the bad men going to jail? Jonathan set down his papers to sign back. Yes, Victor and Leo will go to prison for a long time. Good, Ethan signed firmly. They scared us. I know, Jonathan signed, his movements gentle. I'm sorry I didn't listen when you tried to warn me. Emily's hands moved hesitantly. We tried so many times. I promise I'll always listen now, Jonathan signed, then spoke aloud for Sarah's benefit. No more ignoring what's important. Sarah watched this exchange with a warm feeling. Despite the ongoing danger, something beautiful was happening, a family rebuilding itself through honest communication. Later that day, David Turner arrived with thick folders of financial records. We've narrowed down the list of potential accomplices, he announced, spreading documents across Jonathan's dining table. Based on access to the records that were manipulated, it has to be one of these 3 executives. Jonathan examined the photos David laid out. Richard Harmon, Chief Financial Officer, Thomas Reed, Head of Operations, and Stephanie Clark, Legal Counsel. All 3 have been with me since I founded the company, Jonathan said quietly. I trust them completely. That's what makes betrayal possible, David replied. The SEC has been analyzing transaction patterns. Someone with intimate knowledge of your trading procedures has been working against you for years. Sarah studied the photographs. Have the twins met these people? Many times, Jonathan nodded. They often come to the house for dinner parties or strategy meetings. Maybe they noticed something, Sarah suggested. They're remarkably observant. That evening, Jonathan invited all 3 executives and their families to the penthouse for dinner, explaining he wanted to update them on the situation with Victor. The real purpose was to observe their reactions and give the twins a chance to interact with them. During dinner, Sarah noticed Emily and Ethan becoming increasingly withdrawn. Their hands remained still in their laps, their usual animated signing absent. After the guests left, Sarah approached Emily in her bedroom. You were very quiet tonight, she signed, sitting beside the young girl. Emily's hands moved cautiously. I don't like Mr. Harmon. Why not? Sarah asked. He visited Mom when she was sick, before she died. Emily's face grew troubled. They argued with Dad. We were supposed to be sleeping, but we watched from the hallway. Sarah's interest piqued. What were they arguing about? We couldn't see all the signs. Dad had his back to us, but Mom was angry, really angry. Sarah found Jonathan in his study and related what Emily had told her. "Richard visited Anna?" Jonathan looked confused. "I remember that night. It wasn't about anything financial. Richard was pressuring me to return to work during Anna's final months. He thought I was spending too much time at home." "Are you sure that was all it was about?" Sarah pressed. Jonathan rubbed his forehead. "Anna was furious with him for suggesting I leave her side during her last weeks. It was personal, not business." Despite his explanation, doubt crept into Sarah's mind. Would the twins have any other memories of Richard that seemed unusual? The next morning, Sarah and Jonathan reviewed security camera footage from Blackwell Investments over the past year. David had compiled videos showing unusual activity, late-night office visits, meetings that weren't on the official calendar, and strange patterns in building access. "Richard does seem to be in the office at odd hours," Sarah noted, watching him enter the building at 2 in the morning on multiple occasions. "That's not necessarily suspicious," Jonathan defended. "Richard often works late, always has." The phone rang, interrupting their review. It was Mrs. Peterson calling from the hospital where she'd been treated for shock after the incident with Leo. "Mr. Blackwell," her voice trembled over the speaker, "there's something I need to tell you. When Victor first approached me about helping him, he mentioned working with someone named Richard. I assumed he meant Richard from the gardening service, but now I realize—" "Richard Harmon," Jonathan finished, his face paling. After hanging up, Jonathan sat in silence for several moments. "I've known Richard for 15 years. We started the company together. He was at my wedding. He visited the twins in the hospital when they were born. People can change," Sarah said gently. "Or maybe they were never who we thought they were." Jonathan shook his head in disbelief. "I need more proof before I accuse one of my oldest friends." The proof came unexpectedly that afternoon from Ethan. The boy approached them with a serious expression, his hands signing rapidly. "I just remembered something important," he signed. "At Mom's funeral, I saw Mr. Harmon and Mr. Chambers talking behind the big tree. They were passing papers to each other. Everyone was looking at Mom's picture, but I was watching people instead." Jonathan stared at his son. "You saw Richard and Victor exchanging documents at your mother's funeral?" Ethan nodded firmly. "They looked around first to make sure nobody was watching, but I was. I remember because it seemed wrong to do business when everyone was sad." Sarah watched as Jonathan's expression shifted from doubt to grim certainty. "I need to speak with Richard," he said, his voice hardening. "Alone." The next day, Jonathan called an emergency board meeting at Blackwell Investments. He arranged for the other executives to arrive 30 minutes after Richard, giving him time for a private conversation. Sarah waited with the twins in an adjacent conference room, watching through one-way glass as Richard entered Jonathan's office. "Jonathan," Richard greeted warmly, "good to have you back. This business with Victor is unfortunate, but we'll weather it." "Sit down, Richard," Jonathan said, his voice unnaturally calm. "We need to talk about your involvement with Victor." Richard's smile faltered slightly. "My involvement? I'm as shocked as anyone by his betrayal." "Are you?" Jonathan slid a folder across the desk. "These are financial discrepancies dating back 5 years, long before Victor joined the firm." "I don't understand," Richard said, not touching the folder. "I think you do," Jonathan continued. "Mrs. Peterson mentioned your name." Victor referred to working with Richard when recruiting her help. Richard laughed nervously. "That's absurd. She must have misheard." "My son saw you exchanging documents with Victor at my wife's funeral," Jonathan said, his voice breaking slightly. "At Anna's funeral, Richard. How could you?" Richard's face drained of color. "The twins? But they're deaf. They couldn't have—" "Being deaf doesn't mean they don't see," Jonathan cut in sharply. "They see everything, including things people try to hide." For several moments, Richard sat frozen, then his shoulders slumped. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he whispered. "It started small. My investments collapsed during the recession. I just needed to borrow from the company temporarily." Borrow? You've been manipulating our financial records for years." Richard nodded miserably. "When Victor joined the firm, he discovered what I was doing. But instead of exposing me, he suggested we work together. He had bigger plans, taking control of everything. He saw how vulnerable you were after Anna died and decided to exploit it." Jonathan's face hardened. "So you made Victor the scapegoat? Set him up to take the fall if things went wrong?" "He was ambitious and reckless. The perfect patsy," Richard admitted. "I never wanted to hurt the twins, Jonathan. The guardianship idea was all Victor's." Jonathan stood up, towering over his former friend. "I trusted you with everything, my company, my home, my family." As Richard began offering desperate excuses, security officers entered the room. David stepped forward with a police detective. "Richard Harmon, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit securities fraud," the detective announced. As Richard was led away in handcuffs, Jonathan joined Sarah and the twins in the adjacent room. Emily hugged him tightly while Ethan watched Richard being escorted to the elevator. "Is it over now?" Ethan signed. "Yes," Jonathan signed back. "Thanks to you both. You saw things the rest of us missed." 2 months later, life had found a new rhythm. The Medforce merger proceeded successfully under intense regulatory oversight, saving hundreds of jobs and strengthening Jonathan's company. Both Victor and Richard faced serious charges, with overwhelming evidence against them. Sarah continued working with the Blackwells, her role evolving far beyond that of a housekeeper. She'd become essential to the family's healing process, helping Jonathan navigate his renewed relationship with the twins and facilitating their communication. One evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Jonathan found Sarah organizing materials for the twins' school project. "Sarah," he began hesitantly, "I've been meaning to ask you something." "Yes?" She looked up from her work. "Would you consider staying on permanently? Not as a housekeeper, but working with the twins and helping me establish a foundation for families with deaf children." Sarah paused, surprised by the offer. "A foundation?" Jonathan nodded. "The Blackwell Foundation for Inclusive Communication. It would fund sign language education, technology for deaf children, support for parents." He smiled softly. "The twins already have ideas for programs they want to create." "That sounds wonderful," Sarah replied, genuinely moved. "I'd be honored to be part of it." "You've become important to this family," Jonathan said. "To all of us." Later that night, as Sarah considered Jonathan's offer, her phone chimed with an email notification. It was from her sister Rachel with an urgent subject line. "Urgent. What they're not telling you about the Blackwells." Attached was a file labeled Anna's Last Letter.pdf. Sarah stared at her phone screen, her heart racing. The subject line of Rachel's email seemed ominous. With trembling fingers, she opened the attached file. The letter appeared to be written in a shaky hand. "Dear friends at the Parents of Deaf Children Support Group, by the time you read this, I may be gone. My doctors say I have weeks, not months. While I've accepted this, my greatest fear isn't death. It's leaving my children without their mother and their primary connection to deaf culture. Emily and Ethan are remarkable children. Their deafness has never been a disability in our home, only a different way of experiencing the world. Jonathan learned to sign with us, creating a family language that bound us together. He was so patient, practicing late into the night after the twins were asleep, determined to be fluent for them. My worry is what will happen after I'm gone. Jonathan retreats into work when he's hurting. I fear he might pull away from signing, from the deaf community we've built around the twins. Not from lack of love, but from pain. Signing might remind him too much of me. If you know families who've lost the hearing parent in a mixed hearing home, please share any resources that might help. Jonathan is a wonderful father, but grief makes people do strange things. The twins need their connection to deaf culture to stay strong, especially without me. With gratitude for all your support, Anna Blackwell. Sarah read the letter twice, tears filling her eyes. There was nothing scandalous or threatening, only a mother's love and concern for her family's future after her death. A second email from Rachel arrived. "Sorry for the dramatic subject line. Just realized who you're working for. Found this in our support group archives. Anna Blackwell was a member before she passed. Thought you should see what she was worried about. Call me." Sarah smiled through her tears. Rachel had always been dramatic. The urgent warning was simply her sister connecting dots between Sarah's new job and a name from the support group records. The next morning, Sarah found Jonathan in the kitchen making pancakes with the twins. All three were signing happily, flour dusting their clothes. The scene was exactly what Anna had hoped for in her letter. "Look, Sarah," Emily signed excitedly. "Dad is teaching us his pancake recipe." "They're shaped like hands," Ethan added, proudly displaying a pancake with 5 finger-like projections. Jonathan smiled. "My attempts at signing in pancake form are not very accurate." Sarah watched them interact, seeing the healing that had already begun. After breakfast, while the twins got ready for school, she approached Jonathan. "I received something last night I think you should see," she said, showing him her phone. "It's a letter Anna wrote to her support group before she died." Jonathan stared at the screen, his expression changing as he read. His eyes filled with tears. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew exactly what I would do." "She knew you would find your way back to them eventually," Sarah said gently. Jonathan wiped his eyes. "For 2 years I couldn't sign without feeling like my heart was being torn open. Every movement of my hands reminded me she was gone." He looked toward the twins' room. But Anna was right. They needed that connection more than I needed to avoid my pain. "You're giving them that connection now," Sarah reminded him. "Thanks to you," Jonathan said. "If you hadn't come here, if you hadn't understood them when no one else would." He shook his head. "Thank you for bringing our family back together." 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Greenwich Community Center was filled with people. Colorful banners announced, "The Blackwell Foundation for Inclusive Communication, Opening Celebration." Sarah stood near the stage watching as people filed in. Some were speaking aloud, others signing, many doing both. The foundation's first initiative was funding free ASL classes throughout Connecticut, bringing together hearing and deaf communities. "Nervous?" Jonathan asked, joining her. "A little," Sarah admitted. "It's a big day." As the foundation's newly appointed program director, Sarah had spent months developing youth leadership programs with Emily and Ethan's input. The twins had blossomed in their roles as young ambassadors, helping other children understand deaf culture. "The mayor just arrived," Jonathan noted, "and there's Dr. Mills from the school board." Sarah watched him greet guests with easy confidence. The past months had transformed Jonathan. He had restructured his company, creating a more balanced work schedule that allowed him to be present for his children. He'd become an advocate for inclusive workplace practices, hiring several deaf employees and ensuring all company communications were accessible. The twins hurried over dressed in matching blue outfits for their performance. "Are you ready?" Sarah signed to them. "Yes!" Emily signed enthusiastically. "We practiced all week." "Dad helped us," Ethan added, looking proudly at his father. When the program began, Jonathan took the stage, speaking and signing simultaneously. "Welcome, everyone. 6 months ago, my children taught me an important lesson about communication. They showed me that being heard isn't about sound. It's about someone taking the time to understand." He described how the foundation would support families with deaf children through education, technology, and community building. "Today, my children want to share something special with you," he concluded. The twins took the stage with 20 classmates from their new school, which offered both mainstream and deaf education. As music began playing, the hearing children sang while the deaf children, led by Emily and Ethan, signed the lyrics. Some children did both. From her place in the audience, Sarah watched Jonathan. His eyes never left his children, and when they looked his way, he signed, "I love you," his fingers forming the gesture with natural ease. After the performance, Sarah led her first official sign language class for parents and children. The twins moved around the room, helping people position their hands correctly. Like this, Emily demonstrated to a struggling mother. Your fingers need to be straighter. Across the room, Sarah noticed Jonathan helping a father who was having difficulty with a particular sign. I feel so clumsy, the man confessed. I'm afraid I'll never get this right. I felt the same way, Jonathan told him. For years, I let that fear keep me from communicating with my own children. What changed? The father asked. I realized it's not about getting the signs perfect, Jonathan explained. It's about showing up and trying every day. Our children don't need perfection. They need connection. The father nodded gratefully, practicing the sign again with new determination. Later that evening, the Blackwells and Sarah celebrated the foundation's successful launch with a dinner at home. Mrs. Peterson, who had returned to work part-time, served Jonathan's favorite lasagna. To new beginnings, Jonathan toasted, signing and speaking simultaneously. The twins excitedly discussed future plans for the foundation. Emily wanted to start a summer camp for deaf and hearing children to learn together. Ethan suggested developing video games that incorporated sign language. I think Mom would be proud, Emily signed, her young face serious. I know she would, Jonathan replied, his signing fluid and confident. She always believed in building bridges between people. After the twins went to bed, Jonathan joined Sarah on the terrace. The spring night was cool but pleasant. I never thanked you properly, he said. For what? Sarah asked. For seeing my children when I couldn't, for helping me find my way back to them. Sarah smiled. They're remarkable kids. They made it easy. The foundation board approved your 5-year contract today, Jonathan told her, if you're still interested. I am, Sarah confirmed. This work is important to me. You've become important to us, Jonathan said softly. To the children. To me. They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at the stars. In the past 6 months, Sarah had found more than a job. She'd found purpose. The Blackwells had become her family in many ways, though she maintained healthy boundaries and her own apartment in town. Jonathan's phone buzzed with a text. He checked it and laughed. The twins are supposed to be asleep, but Ethan just sent me a sign language joke, he explained, showing her the message filled with emoji hands. They never stop communicating now that they know you're listening, Sarah observed. That's the greatest gift you gave us, Jonathan said. Helping us hear each other, even in silence. Inside the house, the twins' project posters for the foundation lined the hallway. Their drawings showed families with speech bubbles and signing hands, bridges connecting different groups of people, and smiling faces of all kinds. In the center of one poster, in Emily's careful handwriting, were the words they had chosen as the unofficial motto for the Blackwell Foundation. It's not about getting the signs perfect. It's about showing up and trying every day. As Sarah looked at their artwork, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. What had begun as a simple job application had led to healing for the Blackwells and a new purpose for her. The foundation would help countless families beyond their own, creating a legacy of communication, understanding, and inclusion that would continue for years to come. The silence that once filled the Blackwell mansion had been replaced by something beautiful, the silent but profound language of hands speaking from the heart. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.